Welcome back to Ambitious Millennial Women and a extremely special and warm welcome to our guest, Jordan Sale. Jordan, so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thrilled to jump into this conversation. And Jordan's the perfect guest to have on this podcast today, as she's the perfect example of having a candid conversation with a woman who has done everything right, checks every box, had every success, and wanted something a little more, a little bit more aligned out of her career and her life. So I'm so excited to have Jordan pull back the curtain and share her journey with us. Jordan is a product manager in the social impact space and a former founder. Jordan, we're going to start this conversation the way we do every single coaching conversation. And what do you want to celebrate yourself for?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. And I am celebrating that I recently started a new job in a fairly new function for me, product management. And I just hit 30 days and it's all starting to make a little more sense now.
Yeah. Who did you have to become to get that new role, new function, Jordan?
That's such a great question. I think it really required me to look at my experiences and skills the way a hiring manager might or the way someone else might, and take a more generous view of my experience than I think I often naturally do. So, recognizing that even though I didn't have the exact precise title, I actually do have really good experience that positions me really well to be a PM. And it took me a while to see that, and actually took me being given a freelance role doing product management, realizing, oh, wow, I know how to do this. I like doing this. I can figure out the pieces that I don't know, in order for me to really believe, like, okay, I could do this full time.
Yeah. And what do you want to celebrate yourself for? Maybe I'll just throw it back or reflect it back to you. Like you having this generous, abundant frame of like Jordan has all these pieces, all these experiences, and even if they might not perfectly fit under a single neatly packaged umbrella, they're still going to be totally value added to this role in this organization.
I love that view. And it took a lot of mental work to get there. And my career looks completely different than it looked 7 months ago. I'm in an organization that's 20x, 10x the size, somewhere in there. I'm in a different function. There's a lot of people who do what I do. The focus of the organization is completely different. The revenue structure of the organization is completely different. So that's pretty awesome to, in a span of 7 months, have made so many changes professionally.
And if we back up a little bit, or we do the quick highlight reel of how you got to where you are today, what is the quick snapshot of your career arc that got you to this journey? Let's save the last 7 months of how you got to today for a little later in the conversation. But what did you do? Who were you before you started on this journey?
Definitely. So I started my career in DC. I'd always been kind of interested in social impact and doing good in the world, whatever I thought that meant at age 22. And so I moved to DC and joined a progressive marketing agency. Quickly realized that account management was maybe not the place where I would most excel, and was very lucky to find an early stage startup that was hiring for a marketing role. And I had transferable enough skills that I was able to jump to that. And that was a totally transformative experience. I was there for about 3.5 years. We were in the fintech space and I learned so much so quickly. My coworkers were incredible. And it was one of those 3 year periods where you look back and you just feel like you're a completely different person at the end versus the beginning. After that, I decided to go back to grad school. I went to business school. And while I was there, I got very interested in starting something because I'd been in the early stage startup world and was kind of curious to explore other problem areas. And I was dabbling with a lot of different ideas when a friend called me and wanted to talk through her salary negotiation.
Mm.
And I got off the phone and realized that was probably the most inspiring and fun 45 minutes I'd spent in a while, because I'd always like loved playing that role for my friends, and I'd always really struggled but wanted to get better at negotiating for myself. And that led
I
to me
had no
starting.
idea. So I was just to say, I had no idea that was your origin story.
Yeah, I had been like working on something focused on like helping us stay off of our phones. I'd been working on another idea I honestly can't even remember, and was sort of in this like idea lull where I would just like walk around with a notebook and write down problems that I saw. And then my friend happened to call. So I feel very lucky for the fortuitous timing. And yeah, that led to starting my company, 81 Cents, where we helped underrepresented professionals negotiate their pay. Super cool experience. Definitely the most challenging thing I've ever done. Learned and grew a ton. And we were lucky enough to be acquired a few years ago, 2022-ish, by another small but slightly bigger company in the same space. And so I spent the last couple of years there heading up marketing operations, sort of like generalist within the organization.
Yeah. And our journey started probably in 2019, 2020, when I was a mentor for 81 Cents. And so was supporting your mission, felt just as strongly about it, and got to admire your work from afar. But this chapter of our journey started late last summer when you reached out and said, like, you know, I'm thinking about what's next. So tell us a little bit about how you got from you were working with this organization that had acquired your startup and you reached an inflection point.
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly what prompted it, but I just started to have a feeling like something was not quite right, like something was a little bit off. Like I worked with great people, I found the work interesting, I knew what I was doing, I had it pretty good, but I just sort of got this like internal message that like something was kind of off. And it took me a while to acknowledge it and accept that that was like a real message. And it just sort of prompted me to start thinking about like, where did I think my career would have been at this point in my life? Was I doing what I felt kind of called to do? Was I working in the spaces I felt were most interesting? I think the negotiation space felt very much like a problem I cared a lot about 8 years before. And not to
Yeah.
say that I don't care about it anymore, but you know, we fall like in and out of love with problems in our lives,
We
and
evolve.
we
Yeah.
evolve. And I felt like I had sort of evolved. And if I was being honest, like maybe that evolution had started a couple of years prior, but I was finally ready to sort of acknowledge it. And so that was scary because it's kind of easier to ignore these things sometimes. But once I was finally able to be honest with myself, there was also a lot of relief of like, oh, wow, I do have agency to change
Mm.
and I can think more expansively about my career. And how exciting would it be to kind of like start a new chapter?
Yeah, like you had to give yourself permission to see yourself as changeable, permission to see yourself as maybe having different purpose, and permission to think and daydream and go explore.
Totally. And I think one of the specific fears or challenges I was grappling with was this idea of like, was I giving up too soon? Was like
Mm.
this something I could kind of problem solve my way out of? And was I being sort of like not brave or cowardly by leaving too early? I think of myself as someone who's resilient, but maybe I'm afraid I'm also not resilient. And so, like, I was confused whether the strong thing was to leave or whether the strong thing was to stay and try to make it work.
That will resonate, I think, with perhaps every woman listening. So you are in good company. And I think we have been trained and then value ourselves for our ability to be resilient, make anything work, and just figure it out. And so it's really hard to say, actually, maybe figuring it out is happening somewhere over here versus this path that I'm on.
Totally. Like, we hear all of these stories about people who overcome really difficult situations and stay with something when it doesn't work the first, second, third, fourth fifth
Yeah.
year, it works on the sixth year. And if
Yep.
they hadn't stuck it through, they never would have found that success. So there was definitely some unpacking of that I had to do that you helped me do to make sure that I was like making a decision from the right place.
How'd you make the decision?
Well, it's all a little bit of a blur. One of the tools that helped me that we've like revisited a number of times is just like thinking about one, what was like the motivating like feeling that I was acting from? Was it like strength or fear? And that was very clarifying. And then also thinking a little bit about like the Jeff Bezos like two-way door, or just like, is this something that I could like undo? Like if I leave my job, will my whole life be over? Will my whole career be over? Will I be able to undo this if this was like not the right decision to make? And then I think the last thing was just thinking about like, who do I want to be when I'm 60 or 70? And
Yeah.
is this a decision that my 70-year-old self might be proud
Yeah.
of? Or will like I have ruined her life because I left my job without another job lined up?
Yeah. What did your 70-year-old self tell you?
She was like, definitely go for it. You're going to be fine. I won't even remember what any of these jobs are because I'll probably be focused on like, the next 20 years of life.
Very fair. And then will probably have 10 jobs between
Yeah,
being 35 and 70. Yeah.
exactly. It's probably how it's hard for us to remember the names of everyone who is in our third grade class or whatnot. But at the time, like that was very easy to rattle off. Same thing, but with whole segments of careers.
You built the conviction and the self-trust to leave. And I think to put a pretty sharp point on it, you made the decision to leave your job without having another job lined up. And so, how did you navigate that decision for you? And like, how did you know that you made the decision, yes, to leave your job, but how did you know that leaving your job and giving yourself some space to figure out what was next was the right thing for you?
It was a difficult decision and it was never something I'd done before. Like always, I got the next job while I still had a job. So there were a few components. One was kind of the practical, can I afford to do this? And how long can I afford to do this? And I asked some people I know who had done it, like, how much
Mm-hmm.
runway do you need to have for yourself? How long should you plan on a job search taking? Is it okay to not start job searching on day one? Can you actually take a break and sort of decompress? I figured out that I was able to do this for myself, which is like such a gift. And even then, it was still hard to kind of give myself permission because of the optics and because of the fear of not being able to get a job while I don't have a job. The thing that I think really tipped it for me was realizing that like I didn't know what I wanted to do and I didn't
Yeah.
feel particularly confident that I was going to be able to figure that out in the current moment that I was in. I just felt like I was pretty spent. I think I was probably pretty burnt out from starting the company because I went
Yeah.
from starting the company straight into working for another company. I also had another full-time job in between there to just like make ends meet while I worked on the startup. So I just think I was totally burnt out and I just didn't feel confident that I was going to make a good decision. Like I could probably get a job, but I didn't know what function I wanted to do. I didn't know
Yeah.
what industry I wanted to work in. Like I really thought I might leave tech altogether.
Yeah.
I might become like a case manager at a nonprofit. I had pretty radical ideas of
Yeah.
what I wanted to do differently. And I guess while I trusted myself that I was making the right decision to leave, I didn't trust that I knew what I wanted to do next. And so it sort of felt like I'd probably be making a mistake. But yeah, it definitely took some time to build up the courage to do it. I think the other thing, which I probably didn't admit enough at the time, is I really wanted to give the team I was working for a good amount of notice. And I ended up giving them 2.5 or 3 months notice. And because it was such a small team with 20% of the team leaving, aka one person, it just felt like that was the right thing to do. And I cared a lot about preserving those relationships. So it also felt like it was probably unlikely I would be able to find another job and like line it up so that that timing worked exactly.
Yeah, I think that's probably a reasonable assumption
Yeah,
that someone's going to hire you and want you to start a little bit more immediately than in 3 months. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I
Also,
sort of
what,
like had to leap a little bit.
yeah. And what I was just going to say, what I heard from you is the riskier thing to do would have been to find a job and take a job while you were still in your old role because it just might not have been right. And then you probably would have been, different walls, different logos, but still same old feelings. And so the less riskier thing was giving yourself time and space.
Yeah, definitely. I think I still have a little bit of this old school idea of like, I want to go work for places where I can be for a while. And
Yeah.
I didn't really have enough information about the market or places I'd want to work or what I wanted to do to be able to kind of like assess that from where I was. And the past couple of places I joined recently, like I knew the founders I was working with. So that really
Yeah.
like de-risked it in a lot of ways. And so I wanted to give myself the chance to make a really, really good decision. And I thought that was pretty unlikely while sort of at my burnt out capacity in another full-time role. I think the result, like where I am now, is so much better because of that gap. I think I was really able to kind of step up in a few ways.
What would you tell someone who's wrestling with the same decision, trying to, see if they can get a new job while they're currently in a job, or wondering if they should bet on themselves, give themselves a little time and space?
It's obviously so personal because so much of it is financial, but I think sometimes, and maybe you prompted me to do this, is like kind of like play out some of like the worst case
Yep.
scenarios and sort of
Yeah.
plan for like what you would do with them. So like I had sort of a plan of like, okay, if at 6 months I haven't gotten a job and I haven't made any income, then like here's what I will do about it. Here's how I'll change my approach. As we work together, we like set up like milestones of I will expand my criteria if this isn't happening by this point. So I think like going down both paths and kind of like setting up guardrails for yourself can be helpful. I think it's also helpful to think about like what you might tell a friend in the situation because I think when I
Hmm.
asked myself that, it was very obvious that like if a friend was in the position I was in with that level of like burnout and also the ability to take the time off, I would be like, what? Of course you should take
Yeah.
the time off. It was so easy if I thought about someone else and someone that I respected and was confident in their ability to find a role. So, yeah, but it's totally a tough decision. And I understand why a lot of people are able to do it, but still choose not to.
Yeah. And the exercise that I definitely had you do because my own coach had me do it several years ago is Tim Ferriss's fear setting
Yes,
exercise.
yes,
If
the fear
anyone
setting
wants to go
exercise.
Google it, there's a blog post on it from 2017, and it's still incredibly relevant because it helps you put down those worst case scenarios on paper. And then I think for every single person who I've had do it, and then also myself, you realize the worst case scenario is not that terrible. And you, with your self reliance and scrappiness and ingenuity, will be able to figure it out no matter what.
Totally. It's
Yeah.
almost worse to like kind of have the fear simmering but not acknowledge
Yep.
it. But if you acknowledge it, put it on paper, you're kind of like, oh, I can deal with that.
I think I had fears simmering at the back of my head maybe for 3 years before I quit my job. And then I wrote
Oh.
it down. And then I think I quit my job maybe 2 weeks later. It's something about giving them oxygen or allowing them the light that just makes them so much easier to manage and just loosen their grip a little bit.
Totally.
All right, so we talked about the decision to leave, and you gave yourself space to really be thoughtful about this transition and then to run a very relational, thoughtful job search. So tell us a little bit, Jordan, about the journey of the past 6 months and how you ran your job search. And then how do you land with conviction on this is the type of work that I want to be doing and this is the type of company?
It's definitely one of those situations where it probably looks more polished and
Yeah.
kind of super strategic looking back on it. I think the general idea was I had a lot of learnings from, having quite a few jobs in a bunch of different types of organizations that I wanted to make sure that I implemented into this next role. But it also felt, especially when it came to function, there were a lot of different paths I could go down. And so the general approach was, I think, kind of twofold. One, talk to as many people as possible who were on the paths I was curious about and understand what their day to day was like. And that's both in terms of function and type of organization. And then two, try to do as many projects and try to have the experience of working in an organization before I joined. Partially because I was thinking that I would probably end up at another early stage startup. So I think like what happened was the first few weeks I was totally wiped out and just kind of like, yeah, I don't know. I think maybe I've lost my ambition and, I'm just going to have a job and that's fine. I think maybe I was tired of caring so much about work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then once I started to unwind a little bit, I sort of pretty quickly was like, oh no, wait, actually, I am really ambitious. I just need to get lined up towards a place that I really care
Yeah.
about. And I want to be really deliberate and values aligned in this way. And actually, I do not think this is the phase in my career where I'm planning to coast or just kind of like phone it in. And I remember sending you a message right after the new year. This is the year I'm going to take big swings and,
Yeah. Yeah.
leap and all of this kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
it was
I
really,
think you said something like leave it all out on the field
yeah,
or yeah,
that's
like
what it was.
play hard,
Exactly.
go hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Some athletic kind of
Yeah.
approach.
There was definitely a field in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like pretty surprising how right below the surface that was. And I don't know that that would be the same
Mm,
for everyone, but just kind of
yeah.
like giving myself a little bit of space. And that moment in and of itself was so validating to why I didn't
Yep.
get another job from my full-time
Yep.
role because I would have made a completely different decision, not with that kind of like fuel or ambition in mind.
100%. Yeah.
So that was really great. And then, in addition to doing all of this networking, some of the networking, because it was with early stage companies, it just became like obvious that, or not obvious, but there were like opportunities that just came up to start doing projects and things like that. And so that was really awesome because one, usually, not always, but usually they were paid projects. And so I was able to extend my runway a little bit more and get actual experience of what it was like to work in that organization. And they weren't like, oh, you're in an interview process. Not every startup has this kind of opportunity, but a few did. And so over the course of my 6 month kind of gap, I think I ended up doing 5 different projects, maybe 6 for different startup kind of organizations. 2 were nonprofits. One of them was like a 5-person nonprofit. One of them was like a 25-person nonprofit. 2 were early stage companies. One was like 10 people. One was like 4 people. To kind of sum it all up, they were
Yeah.
really cool ways to start working in new spaces that I'd been interested in, start working with new people, and start to really like be able to refine, okay, what do I want to do and who do I want to do it with?
Yeah. And instead of looking at it on a spreadsheet and hypothesizing or trying to visualize it in your mind, you got to test it in real life.
Yes,
And
totally.
literally, like you ran mini pilots on what you wanted to be doing.
And it was so helpful because I think I had a few scenarios where my first or second conversations went one way and then the actual work experience was totally different, both
Mm-hmm.
in really like positive ways and also
Yeah.
sometimes in like negative ways. And so if I hadn't had those kinds of experiences, I would have just made different decisions if someone said, okay, you have to pick a full-time job right now.
Yeah. And so take us to the punchline. We've alluded to it and we've danced around it a little bit, but tell us a little bit more about how you landed on the function that you wanted to be working in, the space or the mission that you wanted to be focused on, and how you landed up in your current opportunity. Or I should, excuse me, not opportunity, full-time role with
Yeah,
paycheck and benefits. Yeah.
totally. Well, the irony is this is actually an organization that I didn't do a project for.
Yeah, all
It's,
that. Yeah.
yeah, I actually think it's one of the only interview processes I went through that like didn't have that. But I think what happened was I had a freelance role with this really awesome sort of tech driven nonprofit, and they knew I was sort of a generalist and could do a bunch of things. And the thing they needed the most help with was the sole product manager, and the organization needed extra support. And it was kind of in my wheelhouse because it was sort of this, we think there's a problem, there's this big policy change coming down the pipeline, and we need to adapt our product to solve it. But there wasn't that much infrastructure, and there was a lot of this doesn't exist, so kind of build it. And I think the combo of it being a really small team and being really flexible and being really early stage, and AI giving so many tools for someone to
Yeah.
prototype and research and
Yeah.
like take dense policy and understand it quickly meant I was able to step into that role and have much more impact than I like originally would have expected. And yeah, I ended up loving working with that team on the problem. And it kind of opened my eyes to like, wow, I guess I could be a product manager. I think I had historically been a generalist, but I kept kind of falling back into marketing. But something about that just like really wasn't feeling right or that exciting to me. I always kind of felt like, there's people who just like love their function. And I sort of just
Yeah.
decided like maybe I'm just not a person that loves my function. I definitely love this function more than I loved marketing. And it's great to realize that. So yeah, I think through that role, I kind of like built up the confidence. And then when it came to kind of like the space and the mission driven opportunity, I had a few theses, but one of them that I'd been interested in for a long time was around criminal justice reform and that space. But I think like the third variable was the size of the organization and kind of the culture and pace and
Yeah.
energy of the organization. And that I actually probably did the most research on, like out of anything. I just felt like working with really great people who were really mission driven and worked in like a similar pace and fashion that I did, that would probably make me the happiest. And you could insert like one of five societal challenges as the focus.
Yeah.
And so that was where all of the networking came in to kind of like identify what are the characteristics of these kinds of organizations. Cause I just had this feeling like there has to be a nonprofit that kind of operates like a startup that has the heart of a nonprofit. And that's obviously been something that's been talked about for a while, but in my experience, like I just sort of struggled to find that in practice. And I talked to a few people who'd worked in those sorts of organizations and asked them, what do you think are like the qualities? Like, how would I know if this is one of those
Yeah.
organizations or if it isn't? And they just gave me a list of qualities, like look at what software they're using. Is it modern tech software or is it
Hmm.
older school
Yeah.
software? Look at the backgrounds of the founders. Are they coming from the business world or are they not? Look at how they measure their metrics, like how rigorous are those measurements and do they ever bring in like outside evaluators to measure them? And then I basically found that there were like 3 or 4 organizations that kind of met that criteria. And so very luckily, Recidiviz, where I'm working now, was definitely high on that list. And one of the people I had met through my networking was, I think this would be an excellent fit based on the topics you care
Yeah.
about. I would strongly recommend considering that. And so that was, I guess, some sort of external validation like, okay, this feels like the right fit. Now let's see if I can get a job there.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing from you too is the questions you were asking was basically taking your operating principles and then reframing them into questions too. That was the access or the foundation for the due diligence that you were doing.
I was trying to come up with qualities that I would able to
Indicate,
sort, yeah, indicators that
yeah.
this was like an organization that would be kind of like aligned with the way I want to work and
Mm-hmm.
what I want to work on.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, I found the people criteria the hardest one to
Yeah.
understand. You sort of know if an organization is mission driven or not. Of course, like sometimes you get in and they're a little less or a
Yeah.
little more. That usually doesn't happen. But the evaluating, like, kind of the people and the culture, that was where those indicators and questions became more important.
And Jordan, what are your operating principles?
Yes, let's see if I can, how many I can remember. So I know the first one was about high leverage people. And so the idea there is that I do my best work when there are really great people I can talk things through with who help push and expand my ideas. And generally, that's the kind of person who's really positive, really encouraging, and also pushes me to think bigger. The second one was where the impact came in. And so
Yep.
that was all about kind of like using the privileges I've been afforded to try to do good. Another one was about levity in the workplace. Like if we're
Mm-hmm.
going to be doing serious work, we need levity. And also we need to just remember like this is a job and we are full people outside of that. It's less about like bring your whole self to work, but more about work doesn't have to be so serious and intense all the
Yeah.
time. Like we can joke around. Those are three. Oh, okay. And then another really big one was about the pace. I
Yeah.
wanted to feel unblocked. I wanted to feel
Yep.
like I could sprint and
Yep.
make things happen. And I wanted to be in a place where was either moving faster where I'd have to sprint to keep up or was like moving at my speed where if I moved forward, the organization would too.
Yeah. I remembered the conversation we had where I think someone had reflected back to you that you're just like a hammer that's going to go at the thing that's important. And that was just such an apt description of being able to find the environment that would allow you to be the hammer going after your goal and
Yeah,
hammer.
like how frustrating to be somewhere where you can't hammer or be somewhere where you're hammering, but the hammering does nothing. Like you build a
Yeah. Yeah.
structure, but it doesn't
Yes.
contribute to anything bigger.
Yeah, totally. Okay, we only have a few minutes left, and one of the things I really want to make sure we hit on, Jordan, is I always talk about like your career exploration, your job search is as much about the inner work as it is about the outer work, and you have to align your mindset to really be able to execute on your vision and your strategy. And I feel like this journey for you was so full of inner work. What do you think if you think back to yourself who wrapped up at your old job in October of 2025 and now it's July of 2026? What was the inner work that you had to do, or what did you have to work through to allow yourself to get to where you are today?
And I feel like you were really good at reminding me when I would have kind of dips in the process, of which there were many, that the differentiator, like the ability to get to the other side, is often tied to like mindset. Your tactics, like maybe need to shift, maybe not, maybe they're fine. You just need to,
Yeah.
but it's really like the mindset that is so important in continuing to move forward. I feel like there were so many mindset things. Definitely one was about kind of starting to see myself the way others see me and not be the first to put down my skills. So, and this is
Yeah.
totally
Why do
something
you
I'm
have
still
to
working
discount
on.
it before someone else does?
Yeah, I think that's like always been a way of kind of connecting with people and being authentic and also kind of saving face. Like if I can tell you what's wrong with it, then you don't get to embarrass me and tell me what's wrong with it. But definitely like if you don't believe you can do something, then no one else will believe you can either. So that was a really big lesson. I think just kind of this idea that uncomfortable is not bad.
Yep.
When you set a mandate like, I want to change my entire career and I want my career to feel better than it's been feeling, and I want to go in a completely different direction, it's going to be uncomfortable and it should
Yeah.
be
Yep.
uncomfortable. And so, kind of using that as almost a signal that it's often right, or like it doesn't mean that it's necessarily wrong. Sometimes the discomfort is a total signal something is off, but like usually, no, this is uncomfortable because it's right versus this is uncomfortable because this is my gut saying, like, whoa, stop, you big one.
Like for the good discomfort, lean into it and see if you
Yeah.
can push it even further too, or embrace it as you said, the feedback loop that you're headed in the right direction.
Yeah. And there are like tech bros on the internet who talk a lot about that idea. And I don't know that I was like waking up every day being like, let me find more discomfort. But
Yeah.
when it would show up, trying to like tell myself this is actually okay. You know, quit your job and you wanted to try a bunch of different things. So like some of them are just not going to feel good. And it doesn't mean that like you've made a huge mistake in this whole thing. It actually means you're learning what you don't want to do. And that's awesome.
Yeah, you didn't set yourself out on this journey to just be comfortable and be sitting next to a pool for 6 months.
Yeah, totally. But I I'm gonna like trust myself and stay in my uncertain path because that's just not a decision that feels right at this point.
Yeah. And so it's both listening to your intuition and being able to sit in the discomfort at the same time.
Right.
Yeah. Anything else, Jordan?
Oh yeah. Okay. So I'm still sort of in process of thinking how to best explain this, but I remember one time coming to you when like some sort of opportunity had presented itself. It wasn't an offer, but it was maybe an interview or something like that. And I said, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but I would not be like proud to have this on my LinkedIn.
Hmm.
And maybe that's not a good reason. Maybe that's letting my ego run the show. And we ended up talking about like how that doesn't actually have to be that bad of a reason. And sometimes our egos are really not aligned with our true self and care about things that don't matter. And sometimes they're like a reflection of like wanting to present really authentically and like wanting to really like
Yeah.
believe in what you're doing. And it's like not necessarily a bad thing to want to be proud of the work you do. And it was also kind of helpful to remember that I have like this really specific idea of what I will be proud doing.
As we're talking about all of this inner work, it's just listening and realizing that every reaction and every instinct that we have is feedback. And it's telling us and teaching us something. And it seems like here, your ego was really like helping you see that, yeah, you want the people around you to match your potential and match your level of thoughtfulness and excellence and whatever that you bring to the work. And so when even if we're getting signals from something internally that we might have a negative connotation, that can also have good connotation. And so maybe there's good ego, there's the shadow ego, but it's all information.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's really well put. It's all information, and you can decide whether you want to make a decision based off of that or not. And I think in this specific moment, it was really helpful information. And I listened to it and, ended up in a role that I'm really proud of. That is not like, I don't feel proud of it for like the wrong reasons. I feel proud of it for
Yeah.
the right reasons.
Yeah. There's no sort of shadow ego there because it's a glitzy brand name. Yeah.
Right.
Very aligned. Yeah. Okay, let's wrap it up, Jordan. So you have the mic to talk to 10,000 other ambitious millennial women. What do you want to leave them with? What's your message for these women?
I think the thing I came back to the most when I felt the most unsure about what I was doing, if I should go for this opportunity that I didn't have enough traditional experience in. I think the quote, leap and have faith that the net will come was very, very helpful. And it's sort of like, it just kind of helps give you permission to not have it all figured out, but kind of wraps it up in a nice quote that makes you feel better. And I think that has been my experience of like every time I've left, like the net has come. Maybe it's in a different shape than I expected. Maybe it's doing something completely different than I expected. But generally, like I look back on this whole experience and have like very few regrets and have so much like gratitude and pride that I gave myself permission to do this and that I am where I am now. And I know I wouldn't have been able to get to where I am now without quite a few leaps along the way.
And I feel like we could have another 45-minute conversation around what that's going to teach you or give you conviction to do in the future. But I think we'll just leave it with, yeah, the net appeared for you and it's a pretty great net, it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome, Jordan. Thank you so much for the conversation. And I feel like I've got five different things from this conversation that I want to send every single one of my clients to listen and learn from you. So, really appreciate you sharing your experience and your words of wisdom with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's so much fun to look back on this time.